We're entering Longwood, one of the great unfinished, ironically, antebellum homes. We are at the back of Longwood. This is the only octagon designed home, incredibly elegant as it is. This is pretty spectacular elegance with a far more interesting story. What is fascinating about this structure is that, number one, it's magnificent. I don't know that you'll find anywhere a house like this. Not only its outward design and construction, which is pretty much complete, but what was envisioned for the interior. You can get a book on this that would be very explanatory, and I may just do it. But what's really profound about it is that it represents a moment in time when a cataclysmic shift was taking place, not only to the United States and to this society, but to this family and ultimately to this home. It reflects that cataclysmic change. And that shift was from, if you look into the mind of Julia and her husband, Mr. Nutt, who built this complex. They were very, very wealthy people, owning many plantations in Louisiana. But he built this, this part got done in 18 months. I think just around 1861, about 1862, of course, the war was well on its way and things had stopped because the economy got shut down because there was no place to move cotton. So they became heavily indebted, and that was the point, somewhere in there, that the change occurred. So beneath this is another floor called the basement. That's where the family ultimately lived. He only lived here for something like 18 months and then he died. And she lived for 34 more years raising her family. Stayed in the family for 100 years. But these other floors, this one, that one, that one, that one, all unfinished, as you saw in the videos. Imagine what she would have thought all the time she was here raising her children, where she was reduced from one of the wealthiest women in America to one of the poorer, where her kids and she were selling the produce of their small plot here, not a plantation. They lost the plantation, all of them that they owned. Very much the Gone with the Wind story. And she must have stood on these grounds after the collapse of their world and imagined how it might have been had the war ended quickly, as many Southerners thought it would, and Northerners. Had life gone on as they had assumed it would, and that this house had been completely finished and her husband had not died, and they had lived life as they had originally planned it. Beautiful is this home. And how fairy tale the story would have been. The basement that actually became their living quarters for the rest of her life. She apparently once thought about trying to finish off the first floor. The bid was $8,000. She never had the money. She and her husband planned this circular area here as a shaded place. There were 6 trees originally. One had died that Julia planted, and the husband was going to put a gazebo here, theoretically for the children to play in. And down there to the left, or straight ahead of us now, is the carriage house, the oldest building in Natchez apparently. And this is a 3-story, although it looks 2, guest or slave quarters. Now that's for their slaves on this property alone that was going to hold 30 people to take care, not to mention children, to take care of the family of 10. Would the kids have played in these trees? Have to have played in these trees.
Natchez, if you hadn't been in there, go, because her original carriage is in there.
Sure what this machine is for. But these would have all been implements that the family would have used as they grew up, as they put their sweat to the land that they thought would always be taken care of by their slaves, or servants, as the slaves themselves demanded to be referred to as. This was the original entryway, although you would normally expect the entry to be at the front. See the third story, there is a basement, not to mention an attic. The site of the kitchen before it burned down, remember you always built the kitchen away from the house so that the threat of fire was lessened. Isn't this magnificent? Ancient Mounds Trail, Marksville Mounds. This is at the Marksville State Historical Site in Marksville, Louisiana. Or Louisiana, as they say here. Marksville is a ceremonial center with 2 earthen ridges enclosing 7 mounds. Indians built these earthworks between 100 BC and AD 400, in other words, just before Caesar. During that time, the site covered 200 acres and included other earthworks that are now destroyed. The pottery here is very similar to Hopewell in Ohio and Illinois. This complex closed a week ago, so we can walk the grounds. This first mound, or Mound 4, is conical burial mound. It looks like it. Marksville period AD 1 to AD 400. So we have some reference. There's the visitor center, my vehicle parked beyond that. Our mound to the left that we just saw, another long mound with a flat top, and probably the plaza. And here another mound. At least it looks like a mound. It's quite wide but relatively shallow. It also looks like from here, where those clump of trees are in the middle, it was a little plateau, and perhaps that was another mound on top of the mound. Makes sense. Missed this mound. Mound 5, small conical mound, possibly uncompleted burial mound. Again, 1 to 400 AD. Mound 2, called a truncated pyramidal mound, 1 to 400. But you notice that, I'll pan over here, there's the walkway, so theoretically I'm already on the mound. It rises up to what looks like a little plateau where those trees are, and then further on another. Now whether those were plateaus on which there were buildings, or whether they were individual mounds. A little ways down from where we stood, notice that there's a rise indicating that something flowed this way. Whether it was a ramp or not, I don't know. Here we can see a little more distinctly at least one of the plateaus, suggesting the area to its right may have been a mound. The other end, on the same side, there you can see it rises up as though somehow there might have been a ramp, but it'd be a very broad slope to it. And here we can see one terracing right there, and then another terrace looks like 5 feet above that, and then it goes up further to what may have been individual mounds. Estimated the site was about 200 acres at its peak. There's my van way over there. I'm guessing we may be looking at 10 or 12 acres here now, if that much. Close here was Old River, an early Mississippi river, around 4000 to 2500 BC. What relevance that has to this site other than creating this escarpment in front of us, I don't know. So I walk along the far side of what I would call the plaza. You'll notice that not too far from us, maybe 50 yards from here, it rises up from where I'm standing now and from this plaza level over here to still another level, unless that is a mound and I just can't see it clearly from here. Now there were also 2 ridges mound, I assume that's long, I don't see a drawing yet of it, that were on this site. Where exactly, I don't know. But there was a little mound right here. You can see it rise right up, flattens out a little bit, and drops off on all of those sides there. Here there's a drainage, but it may be a relatively modern construct. Here we may be able to see another perspective of this, what looks like a shallow mound, that very wide-based mound that was truncated directly behind it. There's a swale right here. Don't know if it's modern or old. First close-up view of this large mound. Slopes upward from this point here, up like that. Now that could be simply normal erosion over time. Don't know, but it's a good size. Probably a full acre. You can see the steepness of the sides, whether that's an original slope or one restored, I don't know. Now panning from this direction, you'll get a sense of the view from this high point, which makes sense since it's the one that overlooks the plaza and would put the leader at the highest point of anybody. File looks like something archaeologists or grave robbers or their equivalent would have made. I've been walking on, don't know whether it was a natural phenomenon or not, whether it might have been one of those ridges, and the ditch on the other side just simply reflects the borrow for this. But also it could be that that other line there is the second and the concentric linear mound. Apparently this outer one is truly a earthwork. It's probably 1 to 400 foot length. It's probably worn down. It might have been 6-7 feet at max height. It is in fact a ridge. It's a fairly good size one in width. It's probably 40 feet, rising to a height above the ditch at least of maybe 3 or 4 feet now. And it does seem to stay pretty much in same distance away from that outer linear mound. There's shallow mound across the plaza, that large mound over there, and the visitor center. It refers to 7 mounds, but I only saw 5. But it does refer to the 2 earthen ridges. Presumably is one of those ridges, but now notice that there's been considerable divergence from and distance between the two, from over there to right here.